Hey, you there! Before we jump into this wild story, drop a comment below where are you watching from today. And if you love crazy neighbor drama, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss more. Now here's a question for you. Have you ever had a neighbor who thought they ruled the world? What would you do if they called the cops on something as silly as a clock? Stick around because this story about to blow your mind. It was a bright and sunny Saturday morning in a quiet little street called Maple Grove. The kind of street where houses sit in neat rows with green lawns and flower beds full of color. Birds were singing happy songs, darting from tree to tree. Kids zoomed by on their bikes, laughing and shouting. The air smelled sweet, like fresh-cut grass and blooming roses. It was the kind of day that made you want to run outside and do something fun. For 12-year-old Timmy Parker, that meant working on his favorite thing in the whole world, building stuff. Timmy wasn't like most kids. Sure, he liked video games and ice cream, but what he really loved was making things with his hands. He'd spend hours in his garage, surrounded by tools, wires, and bits of metal. His room was full of cool inventions, robots that rolled across the floor, a lamp that blinked to music, even a toy car that could climb walls. His mom called him a little genius, and his dad just grinned and said, "That's my boy." Timmy didn't think he was a genius. He just liked figuring out how things worked. His newest project was the coolest one yet. It was an outdoor clock, big and shiny, and he'd built it all by himself. He made it from stuff he found around the house, old bicycle gears, a sparkly silver hubcap, and some wooden scraps from his dad's toolbox. He painted it with bright neon colors, green, pink, and blue, so it glowed like something from a spaceship. Timmy had spent weeks on it, gluing and hammering and testing. Now it stood tall on a wooden post right by the driveway, ticking loud and proud. Every time he looked at it, his heart felt big and warm, like he'd made something special. That morning, Timmy was out front, polishing his clock with an old rag. The sun made the hubcap shine like a mirror, and he couldn't stop smiling. He imagined showing it off to his friends at school. Maybe they'd want to build clocks too. He was so busy dreaming that he didn't hear the sharp click-clack of high heels coming closer. Not until a big shadow fell over him, blocking the sun. Timmy looked up, and there she was, Mrs. Karen Wadsworth, the meanest neighbor on Maple Grove. Everyone in the neighborhood knew her. They called her HOA Karen when she wasn't listening. HOA stood for Homeowners Association, a group that made rules about how houses and yards should look. Karen was the boss of the HOA, and she acted like she owned the whole street. If your mailbox was a little crooked, she'd leave a grumpy note on your door. If your dog barked too loud, she'd call and complain. One time, she told Timmy's best friend, Jake, that his basketball hoop was against the rules because it was an inch too low. An inch, who measures that? Karen wasn't tall, but she looked big when she was mad. Her arms were crossed tight and her lips were scrunched up like she'd just eaten a sour lemon. She wore a fancy dress and shiny shoes, and her hair was piled high on her head, not a single strand out of place. Her eyes were sharp like a hawk watching a mouse. Timmy felt his stomach twist. He didn't like trouble, and Karen was trouble with a capital T. "Young man," she said, her voice loud and pointy, "what is that thing?" Timmy blinked. "It's a clock," he said, standing up straighter. "I made it myself." Karen's nose wrinkled like she smelled something bad. "A clock? It looks like a pile of junk. It's ugly and it's breaking every rule in the book. This neighborhood has standards, you know. That thing is an eyesore. Take it down by noon or I'm calling the authorities." Timmy's mouth dropped open. Authorities for a clock? He looked at his creation, its bright colors sparkling in the sun. It wasn't hurting anyone, it just told the time and looked cool. Why was she so mad? He wanted to say something, but his throat felt tight, like the words were stuck. Karen didn't wait for him to answer. She turned and marched back to her house across the street, her heels clicking like a warning. Timmy's mom, Lisa, was on the porch, watering her flowers. She'd heard the whole thing. She put down her watering can and walked over, putting a hand on Timmy's shoulder. "Don't worry, sweetie," she said, her voice soft. "She's just being Karen. That clock is amazing and you should be proud." Timmy nodded, but he didn't feel proud anymore. He felt small, like Karen had taken something from him. He looked across the street at her house. It was perfect, of course. The grass was cut just right, the windows sparkled, and the front door had a fancy wreath. But Timmy had always thought there was something weird about Karen's place. He couldn't explain it, but it gave him a funny feeling, like there was more to her than just being bossy. See, Timmy was curious, maybe too curious. For weeks he'd noticed strange things happening at Karen's house. Late at night when he was supposed to be asleep, he'd see cars pull up, big black ones with dark windows. Men in suits would get out, carrying heavy bags. Sometimes he heard a low humming noise like a machine working hard. Once he saw a blue light flashing in her backyard, quick and snaky, before it disappeared. He hadn't told anyone, not even his parents. He wasn't sure what it meant, but he kept it in the back of his mind, like a puzzle he hadn't solved yet. Back in the yard, Timmy picked up his rag and started polishing again, but his heart wasn't in it. He kept glancing at Karen's house. She was standing by her mailbox now, talking on her phone, her voice loud enough to hear bits and pieces. "Yes, it's hideous. No, they won't listen. I'll handle it." She sounded so sure of herself, like she always got her way. Timmy's hands curled into fists. He wasn't going to let her ruin his clock. It was his, and he'd worked hard on it. But what could a kid do against someone like Karen? He thought about what she'd said, calling the authorities. Did she mean the police? Over a clock? It sounded crazy, but Karen was the kind of person who'd do it. Timmy's dad, Greg, always said she loved power more than anything. Some people, he'd told Timmy once, feel big by making others feel small. Timmy didn't understand it then, but now it made sense. Karen wanted to win no matter what. As the morning went on, the neighborhood buzzed with its usual sounds. A dog barked down the street, a lawnmower roared to life, kids shouted as they played tag, but Timmy felt like he was in his own little world, staring at his clock. He remembered every step of building it, how he'd stayed up late sketching ideas, how he'd burned his finger with the hot glue gun, how his mom had clapped when he showed her the finished thing. It wasn't just a clock to him. It was proof he could make something real, something that mattered. He wondered what his friends would say. Jake would probably laugh and call Karen Captain Grumpy. Sarah, who lived next door, would say to ignore her, but Timmy couldn't ignore it. Karen's words kept looping in his head, take it down by noon. Noon was only a couple of hours away. What would happen if he did? Would she really call someone? And what did she mean by authorities? The more he thought about it, the more questions he had. Timmy's mom called him in for breakfast, pancakes with syrup, his favorite. He sat at the kitchen table, but he barely ate. His eyes kept drifting to the window where he could see his clock standing tall. His dad noticed. "Timmy," he said, leaning back in his chair, "don't let that lady get to you. She's all talk. Nobody's taking your clock." "But what if she does call someone?" Timmy asked, his voice quiet. His mom smiled. "Then we'll deal with it together. That's what families do." Timmy tried to smile back, but it felt wobbly. He wanted to believe her, but Karen wasn't like other grown-ups. She didn't give up. He remembered last summer when she got mad at Mr. Thompson for parking his truck on the street. She called the city every day until he moved it. If she wanted Timmy's clock gone, she'd keep pushing until it happened. After breakfast, Timmy went back outside. The sun was higher now and the air was getting warm. He sat on the grass by his clock, running his fingers over the gears. They were smooth and cold, and they made a soft clicking sound when he spun them. He thought about taking the clock down just to avoid a fight, but then he pictured Karen's smug face and his stomach burned. No way, he wasn't giving up that easy. Across the street, Karen's front door opened. She stepped out, holding a clipboard, her eyes locked on Timmy's yard. She didn't say anything this time, just stared like she was measuring something. Timmy stared back, his heart thumping. He didn't know what was coming, but he could feel it. Something big, something that would change everything. And here's the thing, Timmy had no idea how right he was. Karen's threat about his clock was just the start. She thought she was in charge, but she didn't know the cops were already watching her. She didn't know her perfect little world was about to fall apart. And she definitely didn't know that a kid with a clock was about to help make it happen. Timmy stood by his shiny clock, his heart beating a little faster than usual. He wasn't the kind of kid who got scared easily. At school, he'd faced bullies who teased him for carrying a toolbox instead of a backpack. He'd learned to stay calm, to keep his head up, even when things got tough. To him, Mrs. Karen Wadsworth was just a grown-up bully with fancier clothes. Her mean words didn't shake him, at least not at first. He wiped the grease off his hands with an old rag and looked her straight in the eye. "It's just a clock, Mrs. Wadsworth," he said, keeping his voice polite. "It's not hurting anyone." Karen's eyes got small and sharp, like a cat about to pounce. Her lips twisted into a frown that made her look even angrier. "Not hurting anyone," she snapped, her voice loud enough for the whole street to hear. "That ugly thing is lowering property values. Houses here are worth a lot of money, young man. This neighborhood has rules your family never follows." She pointed at the clock like it was a pile of trash, not a project Timmy had spent weeks building. Before he could say another word, she turned and marched back to her house across the street. Her high heels went click-clack on the pavement, loud and fast, like a bomb about to go off. Timmy watched her go, his stomach feeling all knotted up. He didn't understand why she cared so much about his clock. It was just a bunch of old bike parts and paint, but to him it was special. He'd made it with his own hands, and every tick it made felt like a little cheer just for him. Why couldn't she see that? He looked at his clock, its neon colors glowing in the sunlight. It wasn't ugly, it was awesome. From the porch, Timmy's mom, Lisa, had heard everything. She was holding a glass of lemonade, but her face looked tired, like she'd dealt with Karen too many times before. She walked over to Timmy and put a hand on his shoulder. "Don't worry, sweetie," she said, her voice soft and warm. "Karen's all bark and no bite. She'll forget about this by tomorrow." Lisa smiled, but Timmy could tell she wasn't so sure. Karen wasn't the kind of person who forgot things. Timmy nodded, but deep down he wasn't convinced. He'd seen Karen get mad before, really mad. Last month she'd yelled at Mrs. Carter for planting purple flowers instead of red ones. Purple flowers, who cared? But Karen had made such a fuss that Mrs. Carter replanted her whole garden. If she could do that over flowers, what would she do about a clock? Timmy's hands curled into fists. He wasn't going to let her win, not this time. Across the street, Karen was already planning her next move. Her house looked like it belonged in a magazine, white shutters, perfect grass, not a single weed in sight. Inside, everything was just as neat. The furniture was shiny, the floors sparkled, and every picture frame was perfectly straight. Karen liked things to be in order. Messy yards, loud kids, and weird clocks. Those things made her mad, really mad. She stomped into her kitchen, her heels clicking on the tile floor. She grabbed her phone from the counter and punched in a number she knew by heart, the HOA complaint line. "Hello," she said when the voicemail beeped, her voice sharp like a knife. "This is Karen Wadsworth from Maple Grove. There's a hideous clock in the Parkers' yard. It's against the rules and it's ruining our neighborhood. I expect it gone by tomorrow." She hung up, her cheeks red with anger, but she wasn't done. Oh no. Karen didn't just make one call and wait. She scrolled through her phone, looking for another number. "If the Parkers want a fight," she muttered to herself, "they'll get one." She didn't know it, but Timmy was watching from his front yard. He He couldn't hear what she was saying, but he saw her packing by her window, her phone pressed to her ear. She looked like a general planning a war. Timmy's stomach twisted again. He didn't like fighting, but he wasn't going to let her take his clock away. It meant too much to him. He'd spent hours gluing gears together, painting every piece just right. He'd even burned his finger with the hot glue gun, but he kept going because he wanted it to be perfect. That clock wasn't just a thing, it was part of him. What Karen didn't know was that Timmy had a secret weapon. It wasn't a gadget or a tool, it was his brain. Timmy was curious, maybe too curious for his own good. He noticed things other people missed, like how birds flew away when a storm was coming, or how his dog Max always barked before the mailman showed up. And lately, he'd been noticing strange things about Karen's house, things that didn't add up. For weeks, Timmy had seen odd stuff happening across the street. Late at night, when he was supposed to be in bed, he'd peek out his window. Sometimes, big black cars would pull up to Karen's driveway. Not normal cars, these had dark windows you couldn't see through. Men in fancy suits would get out carrying heavy bags or boxes. They'd go inside, stay for a while, then leave before the sun came up. Timmy didn't know who they were, but they didn't look like neighbors. Neighbors didn't sneak around at midnight. Then there was the noise, a weird humming sound, low and steady like a machine working hard. It came from Karen's backyard, but only at night. Timmy had tried to figure out what it was. A generator, a fan, he wasn't sure. One time he'd seen a blue light flash behind her house, quick and bright, before it disappeared. It gave him goosebumps, like something out of a spooky movie. He hadn't told anyone, not his mom, not his dad, not even his best friend Jake. He wasn't sure what it all meant, but he kept a list in his head, like clues in a mystery book. Back in his yard, Timmy sat on the grass, staring at his clock. The gears ticked softly and the hubcap caught the sunlight, throwing little rainbows on the ground. He loved that clock. It wasn't just about telling time, it was about showing the world he could make something cool. But now, because of Karen, it felt like a problem. He hated that. Why couldn't she just leave him alone? Why did she have to make everything a fight? Inside her house, Karen was still on the phone. She called another number, then another. She talked to someone from the HOA, then someone else Timmy didn't know about. Her voice was low now, not loud like before. She sounded sneaky, like she was making a plan she didn't want anyone to hear. Timmy couldn't see her anymore. She'd moved away from the window. But he could imagine her, standing in her perfect kitchen, thinking she was in charge of everything. Now, Timmy's mom came outside again, this time with a plate of cookies. "Thought you might want a snack," she said, sitting next to him. She looked at the clock and smiled. "You did a great job on this, Timmy. Don't let Karen make you feel bad about it." Timmy took a cookie but didn't eat it. What if she calls someone mom, like the police or something? Lisa laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. "She won't call the police over a clock. That's silly. She's just trying to scare us." Timmy wanted to believe her, but he wasn't so sure. Karen didn't seem like the kind of person who made empty threats. He remembered a story his dad told him about last year when Karen got mad at Mr. Lee for hanging Christmas lights too early. She'd called the city every day until he took them down. If she could do that over lights, she could do worse over a clock. The morning turned into afternoon and the neighborhood got busier. Kids played soccer in the street. A lady walked her dog, waving at Timmy as she passed. But Timmy barely noticed. He kept looking at Karen's house, waiting for something to happen. He didn't know what, maybe a car pulling up or Karen coming back to yell again. His clock kept ticking, but every tick felt louder, like it was counting down to trouble. Timmy's dad, Greg, came home from the store, his truck rattling into the driveway. He saw Timmy sitting by the clock and frowned. "What's wrong, kiddo?" he asked, kneeling down. "Karen says she's gonna call someone to take my clock away," Timmy said, his voice small. Greg shook his head. That woman needs a hobby. Don't worry, Timmy. Nobody's touching your clock. It's on our property and it's not breaking any laws. Timmy nodded, but he still felt uneasy. He looked across the street again. Corinne's front door was closed now, her windows dark. It was quiet, too quiet. He didn't trust it. Corinne wasn't the kind of person who gave up. She was planning something, he just knew it, and whatever it wasn't good. What Timmy didn't know was that Corinne's plans were about to get her in big trouble. She thought she was the queen of Maple Grove, but she was hiding secrets, big ones. Those late-night cars, that humming noise, the blue light, they weren't just weird, they were clues. Clues to something way bigger than a fight over a clock. And Timmy, with his curious brain, was closer to figuring it out than he realized. The sun was high in the sky by noon, making Maple Grove feel warm and sticky. Timmy was in the garage, tinkering with a broken toy car when he heard Corinne's sharp voice again. He peeked out and saw her marching across the street, her high heels clicking like a warning. This time she wasn't alone. A man walked beside her wearing a bright blue polo shirt with the HOA logo stitched on it. He held a clipboard and looked serious, like he was on a mission. Timmy's heart sank. This wasn't good. Timmy's dad, Greg, had just stepped outside to grab the mail. He stopped when he saw Corinne and the man coming. "Mr. Parker," the man said, his voice flat, "this structure violates Code 47B. He pointed at Timmy's clock, its neon colors shining in the sunlight. "Remove it within 24 hours or you'll face a fine." Greg scratched his head, his eyebrows scrunching up. "It's a clock," he said, sounding confused. "My kid made it. What's the big deal?" Corinne crossed her arms and smirked, her lips curling like she'd just won a game. "The big deal is standards, Greg," she said, her voice dripping with pride. "Some of us care about this neighborhood. That thing is an eyesore and it's breaking the rules." Timmy watched from the garage, his stomach twisting into a tight knot. He didn't care about codes or fines. He just wanted his clock to stay. It wasn't hurting anyone, it was just cool. He'd spent weeks building it, gluing gears, painting it bright colors, making it perfect. Now Corinne and this man wanted to take it away. It wasn't fair. His hands clenched into fists and he felt a spark of anger. He wasn't going to let them win. Not without a fight. Greg shook his head and laughed a little, but it wasn't a happy laugh. "You're serious? A fine for a kid's clock? Come on, Corinne." Corinne's smirk didn't budge. "Rules are rules," she said, then turned and walked away with the HOA man trailing behind her. Timmy's dad stared after them, muttering something under his breath before heading back inside. Timmy stayed in the garage, his mind racing. He couldn't just sit there and do nothing. Corinne was up to something, he could feel it, and those weird things he'd noticed about her house, the late-night cars, the humming noise, the blue light, maybe they meant something, maybe they were clues. That night Timmy waited until his house was quiet. His parents thought he was asleep, but he was wide awake, lying in bed with his heart thumping. He had a plan. It wasn't a big plan and it might not even work, but he had to try. He slipped out of bed, grabbed his flashlight from his desk and tiptoed to the back door. The house was dark except for the soft glow of the kitchen clock. He moved carefully, avoiding the creaky spot on the floor. If his mom or dad caught him, he'd be in big trouble. Outside, the air was cool and the street was silent. The moon hung low, casting long shadows across the lawns. Timmy's sneakers made no sound as he crept across his yard and toward Corinne's house. He wasn't spying, okay, maybe he was, but something felt wrong and he needed to know what. He'd been watching Corinne's house for weeks, noticing things that didn't add up. Now was his chance to get a closer look. He crouched behind a big bush near Corinne's fence, his flashlight tucked in his pocket. His heart was beating so loud he was sure someone would hear it. He peeked through the leaves, scanning her yard. Everything looked normal, too normal. The grass was perfect, the flowers were neat, and the porch light was off. But then he saw it, a faint blue glow flickering through the basement window. It wasn't steady like a lamp, it flashed on and off like something alive. Timmy's eyes widened. He'd seen that light before, late at night from his bedroom window. But now he was closer and it gave him chills. Then he heard the noise, the humming he'd noticed before. It was louder now, deep and steady, like a car engine warming up. It came from somewhere behind the house, maybe the basement. Timmy's fingers tightened around his flashlight. What was going on in there? Before he could move, voices broke the silence. One was Karen's, sharp and angry, like always. The other was deeper, rough, like someone who smoked too many cigarettes. Timmy held his breath and listened. "You said this would be done by now," the man growled, his voice low but clear through the open basement window. "If they find out, we're in big trouble." "Relax," and Karen snapped back, her words quick and hissy like a snake. "No one suspects a thing, not even that nosy kid across the street." Timmy's heart skipped a beat. Nosy kid, was she talking about him? His face got hot and he ducked lower behind the bush, afraid they might see him. What did she mean? Suspects? What were they hiding? His mind buzzed with questions, each one bigger than the last. He wanted to run home, but his feet felt glued to the ground. He had to know more. The voices got quieter, like Karen and the man had moved deeper into the house. The blue light flickered again, then went out. The humming noise kept going, steady and creepy. Timmy's hands were sweaty and his flashlight felt heavy in his pocket. He knew he should leave. Sneaking around was risky, and if Karen caught him, she'd be madder than ever. But he couldn't shake the feeling that he was onto something big. He crept back to his house, careful not to make a sound. His mind was like a puzzle with missing pieces. The cars at night, the men in suits, the blue light, the humming. What did it all mean? Karen wasn't just a mean neighbor. She was hiding something, and Timmy was sure of it. He slipped back into his room, his heart still racing, and climbed into bed. He didn't sleep much that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that blue light and heard Karen's voice. No one suspects a thing. The next morning, Timmy woke up tired but determined. He wasn't going to let Karen scare him. Not her, not the HOA man, not some silly fine. His clock was staying no matter what, but he knew he had to be smart. Karen was sneaky, and now he knew she was keeping secrets. He decided to keep watching her just like she was watching him. If she made one more move against his clock, he'd be ready. Downstairs, his mom was making breakfast, eggs and toast, his favorite. She smiled when he came in, but her eyes looked worried. "You okay, Timmy?" she asked, sliding a plate in front of him. "Yeah," he said, but his voice was quiet. He didn't tell her about sneaking out. He didn't want her to worry more than she already was. "Your dad talked to the HOA man on the phone," she said, sitting across from him. "He says the fine's not a big deal, but we need to be careful. Karen's not giving up." Timmy nodded, his jaw tight. Careful, he could do that. But he wasn't just going to wait for Karen to win. He was going to figure out what she was hiding. Maybe it had nothing to do with his clock, but maybe it did. Either way, he wasn't backing down. Outside, the neighborhood looked normal. Kids riding bikes, a dog barking, the mailman waving as he passed. But Timmy felt like he was in a different world. Every time he looked at Karen's house, he saw those clues again, the light, the noise, the voices. He didn't know what they meant yet, but he was going to find out. And when he did, Karen wouldn't be so smug anymore. The next morning started like any other, but it didn't stay that way. Timmy woke up to a loud noise, sirens blaring outside his window. He jumped out of bed, his heart racing, and ran to look. A police car was parked right in front of his house, its red and blue lights flashing bright. Timmy's stomach dropped. What was going on? He threw on